Okay. Share my screen. So hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Rosetta version 7.4, which was released in January. And the focus areas in 7.4. So today I'll talk about 7.4. I'll talk about what we're expecting in version 8. I will then encourage you to come to the annual meeting at KB. That's a spoiler. And a few updates on the community, on some of the interesting projects we're currently doing with some of our customers. And then, if time allows, we'll open it up for questions. So the focus areas in 7.4, a lot of work done around preservation services, enhancing the reliability, focusing around the validation stack overhaul, which is some great work which has been done by the working groups over the past couple of years. We'll then talk about infrastructure, some of the upgrades we've been doing. We've also got some big stuff coming up in version 8 and after. Integrations, so we've had advancements with the APIs and enhanced integration, ongoing integration with S3 storage, either local or public. So preservation, which is a big focus here. We've basically delivered the first and complete work for multiple file format identification. And here, this is an epic. So it's a sort of multi-part enhancement request also from the customers. The end game here is, as you can see here in the middle column, to increase the reliability of the system. So we're reducing the dependency eventually on Pronom. It's going to eventually allow us to expand the registries that we are testing the files against. And at this stage, important to emphasize, we're mainly gathering information in the system from different tools. So we are still dependent on Droid, or more rightly so, we are still dependent on Pronom. And operationally, the different services in the system, they still run according to one source of truth, which is Droid. If Droid isn't there, then also Siegfried or other tools which run on Pronom will also be the source of truth, but a single source of truth. The output of the different tools, so basically what will happen is that one file can be deposited, multiple tools can run on that file to identify the file format. The system will then run according to the output of Droid, but the output of Siegfried or any other tool which you plug in will be recorded in the system. It will be indexed, so you can run some research. You can analyze where there are discrepancies between the tools. You can understand whether there are file formats which are identified by one tool and not by the other. And that will give us some material or food for thought towards the next stage, which would be what are we now doing with those with the discrepancies or with output from two different tools? And the next basic enhancement request in the validation stack overhaul will be dealing with how do we deal with it in the technical analyst workbench in case there is a discrepancy between the tools? How do we create some sort of how do we use that complementary information that we receive between the two tools to enrich the system? So this is really that initial stage of gathering the information. So let's take a brief look at what that would look like in Rosetta. So this is Rosetta. And so first, if we take a look at the task chain, then should have one with multiple identifiers, view. Here we can see that we have format identification task. And now in the task parameters for the format identification task, you have the option of selecting multiple identifiers. Okay, so here we have Droid, we have Siegfried. Okay, so basically, actually, let's take a look in edit mode. And you can see here, similar to other tasks, you have basically a list. You can select, you can remove from the format identification methods. And this is plugin based. So that means that if you add your own plugin with an additional identifier, then that will be here in the list, and you'll be able to add it to the item selected. And then any material flow which runs with this task chain, with this validation stack, will then run these two tools. It is, again, at this point, the prerequisite is that Droid will be the first. All right, the system is if there is Droid and another tool, then the system must run on Droid. Therefore, Droid must be the first. Otherwise, there will be an error here saying you must have Droid as the first tool. But if you have only Siegfried and you don't have Droid at all, then that's okay, and the system will run on Siegfried. And now let's go into the system and just see what the output will eventually look like. So let's take an example of several files which were deposited using both identification tools. So we can search for the objects, and we can search for all the files where the agent, file format agent, contains Siegfried. So here we have the multiple file formats which I previously deposited. And when we take a look at the file, we will see that we have multiple values for the format identification. In this case, it's the same value. Both Siegfried and Droid identified both. So we have two areas here where this is expressed. One is the validation stack outcome. It's just the file format and the event. So the validation stack outcome, currently the outcome will just be the operational one. That is really the meaning of validation stack outcome. And here you will see just Droid, since again, that is the operational output, which then the next stage of metadata extraction and generally all the services in the system run according to, that will be included in the validation stack outcome. However, under the file format, then here we will see the multiple outcomes of the different tools. We will see Droid, we will see Siegfried, we will see the agent, the version of Siegfried here, and some other information. Identification method, this is a defect which was identified by the community, and it will be fixed in the upcoming version, in the next version. So here basically we have all of the information retrieved from Siegfried, and all of this is indexed. Right, so you'll be able to search for both the format which is the output of Siegfried and on pronouns if by any chance there is a discrepancy between the tools, then you'll be able to find both of them. Both of them are indexed, but only one of them is operational. In the upcoming release, so we've actually opened this feature, and we've had several institutions testing it on our hosted environment. We've received some feedback, and we're going to be adding several elements as part of the upcoming release. The next release, one is of course fixing the extension method, but also there's going to be an event. So currently there is an event only for the primary tool. So if it's either Droid or Siegfried, which is operational, then the event will be created according to that. In the next release, there will be an event per tool. All right. So if we run multiple tools, then you'll be able to run, we'll create an event. And if, for example, Droid succeeds and Siegfried fails, then you'll be able to search for all the IEs where Siegfried failed for. So that will allow you some further analysis options. Feel free to start running. You can also continue running the tests on the hosted environment, and feel free to continue sending through feedback, because of course we still have time to incorporate some additions over to the next version. Siegfried. So the next feature, the major feature, which was also coming from the Digital Preservation Working Group, is bulk risk assignment to file formats. So up to now, there was strong coupling between a risk and a format, right? So for a given file format, you can create a risk, which made it difficult to maintain in that many times there are common risks for a bulk set of file formats. For example, there might be a entire classification of, for example, of videos, of textual files, where they all have a common risk identified by the institution, or simply by a wide range of PDF files. And with the current situation, you need to create manually a single risk per file format, which is difficult to maintain, especially if you want to edit the risk, you then have to edit the same risk for all of those file formats. So we've now added the capability to run a bulk risk assignment to multiple file formats. And let's see how that will look like in the system. So I see there's questions coming through. I will relate to them, at the end of the session, if that's okay. But continue sending them through. So currently, when we go into risk identifiers, switch to local, then let's just delete this for the purpose of the demo. And let's add a risk identifier. So here we have the risk identifier, and let's create an identifier, a risk, which is associated with all video files, right? The entire classification of video files. So obsolete video formats, property driven, of course, it's a mock risk from this point of view. Save, risk parameters, of course. Risk parameters. So here we will have the file, the classification. We'll do MPEG files, all right? So we'll do it with the MIME type, file MIME type, video MPEG, add criterion. And now for the related formats. So here we can now add formats and select as many video files as you want, or as many formats as you want. It's a multi-select. We can search, for example, for video under the classification. So let's look for all video classifications. Here we have, as you can see, all the video formats. Select all of them, link to the risk, and there we go. We have all the video formats on the on that risk, and we can now save it. Okay, so we now have this new risk, obsolete video formats, which when we now go in, we can see it has all of the video formats. Similarly, from the format itself, you'll be able to add the format to a specific risk, or add a risk also from the format to multiple other formats. Basically, this from now on, just as an example, I ran a risk analysis process based on the new risk, and in the global risk report, we have obsolete video formats with MIME type video MPEG, which created, we basically have one video MPEG in the system. So we can see basically the entire end-to-end flow from this point of view, in that we created a risk, associated it with multiple formats. We then ran the risk report, which eventually created a preservation set based on the files of which are affected by that risk. So let us continue. So around basic preservation planning. So today we have two workflows for preservation planning. One is the more advanced workflow, which is typically based on risk, which was identified by the system. So in that case, the system automatically creates a preservation set of all the files which are at risk. And then the institutions can start off a workflow of preservation planning, which eventually ends up by migrating the file format from one format to another. And it has some advanced capabilities around creating different alternatives, comparing the alternatives, and complex evaluations, which you can do comparing between the source and the target. However, we did come out several years ago with a more simple and basic preservation workflow, which really is typically for the use cases where the institution knows which file format they want to migrate over to which file format. They don't need to compare alternatives, and really a more simplified workflow, and that they themselves can create the plan. It doesn't need to be automatically created by the system. It's not risk-based. It can be manually created. However, the way the workflow worked till now is that once you created that type of basic plan, it was automatically then signed off. And once a plan is signed off, then you can't erase it, and it doesn't allow that sort of reverting back and editing, and basically also create some a garbage at the end of the day of basic preservation plans which you created, regretted, but you then couldn't delete it. So we added that possibility of deleting a signed off basic preservation plan. All right. So the criterions are basically, if you created the basic preservation plan, which was signed off, but you haven't executed it yet, then you can still delete it. Deleting it means then that you can revert back to the basic preservation plan and edit the set and edit the plan. So let's just see quickly what this looks like. So in the manage preservation sets, you can add a set, 7.4 preservation set. Next, you'll create where all of the file name type equals video MPEG, search, save. So now we have 7.4 for preservation set. We can launch the plan name 7.4 plan, and decide on the target format. Could be any format, just for the point of the demo. Link, internal, and next. Different evaluation criteria, which are possible also with the basic preservation plan. Those of you who are interested in seeing more about this plan, regardless of this of the new capability, there is a nice short video which we released describing this workflow. So 7.4 preservation plan. So at this point, we haven't executed it yet, but it's signed off. So what we can do now, which we couldn't do previously, is we can now delete. And now you can revert back to the preservation set. Sorry. Second. Go again to the signed off plans, 7.4 plan. Delete this one. Maybe I didn't delete the right one. And manage preservation sets. Then now, as you can see, the 7.4 preservation set, we can now delete or edit the results, right? We can go back to editing it and relaunch the plan. Okay, let's move on. around data management. So as part of the epic of structural IEs, I will mention it soon, but really the big bulk of the functionality is also going to be added in version 8. However, we did release a minimal viable product in the recent release, which is open for everyone to test out on our hosted environment. And what we've added is an easy out-of-the-box migration tool, which basically means that those, we know there are use cases with institutions who use the collection hierarchy today, and they would want to migrate it over to structural IEs. And in that way, they don't have to manually create all of those hierarchies again. And also for those currently who they want to have an easy way of creating the structural IEs, they can also just generate collections in the system, migrate them over to structural IEs quite easily. So basically what the workflow does is you can select which collections you want to migrate. So it's on the top level collection level. The system will then export those collections as structural IEs to a designated folder. You do have an XSL file where you can customize the migration itself, the conversion between the collections and the structural IEs, but otherwise there's a simple out-of-the-box XSL which creates structural IEs, which eventually also the root structural IEs will then include a relationship section in the DNX which will point to the content IEs which the collection previously pointed to. The prerequisite here is that each structural IE will be associated with a single collection, since that is the relationship between in structural IEs. It's a one-to-one relationship. And then once you export, so once the system export those collections as structural IEs, so it's already in a SIP format, and you can then just simply deposit those SIPs. And again, you can run additional normalizations and enrichments to that if you desire before you then import it into the system. Let's take a quick look at what that looks like in the system. So under data management, we'll look at collection management. Here we have the collections on the left. You can decide what you want to migrate. And here we have export collections as structural IEs. All right, so this is a new action at the bottom of the collection management section. And add job, right? So it's job based. Here you can give it a name, export collections as structural IEs job 7.4. And here we can select which top level collection we are interested in. Let's select the research data, which is a relatively complex hierarchy. Otherwise, you can select as many as you require. All right, so NFS path to one which I created ahead of time, structural research. And here we have the XSL. So the XSL, if you want, you can optionally go in and edit it if you want to normalize some of the components, which will then apply to the rest of the system. And apply, run now. Okay, so we'll run the job. And now basically, I don't want to connect to the VPN now to show you the result, but basically we have this NFS path. We have a SIP ready of structured IEs. And we will now import it into the system. Then we'll see that we have basically the restored structure, but as structured IEs. So as a Rosetta producer, I will deposit so I have a material flow, which is now pointing to exactly that location. METs structural IEs. It exports them as METs, I didn't mention, which allows you also more options then to manipulate the data. So here we have a collection export. You can see February 16, that's our one. Submit deposit. SIP 2519. shows in the assessor workbench, move it to the next stage. And now we can see the results of SIP 2519. Give it another second. Sorry. Permanent. Search permanent, taking it a second. It's quite a large hierarchy. And I have a good feeling now. No. One more try. So again, so I'll just explain till the move to permanent is completed. Basically, you need to take into account that any change, as we know, in the hierarchy generates an additional METS file. Okay, because now it's related to as a premise entity, as a permanent entity, and therefore, if you want to do any manipulations to the hierarchy, you're better off doing that as part of the XSL or while it's on the folder, on the export folder. Yeah, it's taking longer than usual for some reason. We can get back to it soon. It does say it's in the permanent. Okay, let's continue for now, and we'll try to get back to it later. So enhanced data field search. So currently, the current situation is that the DNX for DC field, for Dublin core field dates, supports multiple formats, right? Which you can see here. It accepts day, month, year, and just year. However, searching in Rosetta, you could search only according to the date picker, which would always generate date, month, year format. So that limited you. There was sort of a discrepancy between the search options and the actual input options in the METS file. So we've now expanded it so you can search for year and for all formats. You can search for year, you can search for month, year, and you can search for day, month, year. So just to see briefly what this looks like in the data management, sorry, search for objects. When you search for DC date, then you can see over here, there's a brief instruction on what formats are supported. So you can either continue using the date picker or select 2023. You can see you can alternatively select the picker. Otherwise, you can just put in the free text and the results will give you. This is on the file level. We search, let's search again on the IE level, just so that you'll see the column DC date equals 2023. Then here you can see all of the IEs with 2023. Similarly, you can do before or after. So you can look for all the articles which were published between 2000 and 2010, for example, when that might be the only indication on those IEs. They don't necessarily have an exact date. Deposit from an S3 source. So this is continuing our integration with S3, either cloud, Amazon, or local S3 object storage. So now we are supporting for a deposit from S3 source. It's all the different submission types, depositing from S3. You can have a submission job, which will automatically harvest from an S3 source, and with all the necessary configurations. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. So here under the submission format, we have here an Amazon S3 deposit. And here you can see there are different parameters, the endpoint, the region, access key ID, and so on. You can add similar limitations to other submission formats, maximum number of files, max file size, and so on, the secret key, bucket name, and so on. And also you can define, depending on where this bucket is, what would be the maximum waiting time for response. And you can limit the file extensions if you want. And now what we will do is we will also take a look. We have a material flow from S3. We'll also just show you quickly. We have here an S3 browser. So here, we have basically an IE which was generated on S3, but similarly it can be on a local object storage folder. And here too, let's just run a quick deposit. And then we'll then take a look at the location, submit the deposit. And that should then pull in the files. Move to the next stage. Let's hope this one will be quicker. Yeah, this one was quick. And here we already have the content deposited from the S3 storage. So for those of you who really have content, you rather use a deposit folder on S3 of any type. This will then allow you to run either bulk. Similarly, actually, maybe I should have started from that, but you also have a submission job. Under the submission job, you can also automatically run here. I should have one ready with the no, but you can add a job simply with the same material flow, which I selected. Let's select the agent name, admin1, producer, Rosetta producer, and then you can select the material flow of S3, and then it will automatically, monitor the folder, the deposit folder, and check if there's new content and deposit it into the system automatically. Okay, let me just see if the previous structure IEs has been deposited. 2519, it was. There we go. So now we have the research data. So it's still being structured. I'm not sure why it's taking longer than other deposits. Maybe let's take a look at the reports, run reports. Here we could take a look at the structural AEs report. Yeah, no, so we have only part of the structure has been deposited. So, but eventually in this report, you'll be able to see the entire hierarchy of the research data set, which was imported. Let's continue. So data management. We've continued the work on processes, on APIs, REST APIs. We now have a list. It's under the configuration section, and this is really because it's more of alignment with the other products where the processes management are under configuration. And you can get the list of processes, get details of a specific process. We've also enriched some of the data, compared to what we had in the SOAP APIs. You can run a process from here. And once you run a process, you can get a list of the process instances if they are still it's still running in the background. So let's see how we're doing time-wise. Not a lot of time, but you can test this out quite easily. If we do have time at the end, then I'll also show you the output of some of these APIs. Administration read-only role. So here the requirement was that there's specific roles, staff, for example, who are responsible for documentation of the configurations in the system of the administration. So you'd want to provide those users with simply with access, view-only access to the administration section. We have something parallel in the management section. We didn't have till now a view-only access to the administration. So what we added here is both the possibility of view-only access to administration, and also you can select specific areas which are excluded, which will be hidden from that specific staff. Confidentiality reasons and roles and privileges and so on. So let's take a look at what that would look like. And this also is a feature which came through from the working groups. Okay, so here we enter Rosetta, and let's go to the user management. Admin view. And here we can see we have the administration view. All right, so we have a user here. This is administration view. When we go to update, you can see that there are all these different sections here, which were again defined together with the working group, which we'd like to exclude them from. So, for example, you can decide that the same user, we don't want them to see any details on the user. All right, so if we remove those, any users related configurations, and now let's log in as the admin view user. I'm now the admin view user. And you can see here, if I search for user, there is no user menus. However, if we go into, for example, the jobs, scheduled jobs management, then here you can see all I have is view. I can't run any jobs, and the same for all other sections of the administration. So that was quite a large development, basically going over all the pages in the administration, removing for a specific role, removing any capabilities to run or to edit, and of course to hide sections according to the privileges of that user. So just some additional work we've been doing, a big upgrade to Tomcat and several other components, third-party components. We also added some DNX elements in the metadata form, so that's the deposit form, so that content providers can now input also some fields which should impact not just the descriptive, but also some, well, there already are some DNX fields, but we expanded this according to the needs of the customers. So upcoming version 8. So the focus areas in version 8, which is going to be a major version, is preservation. We're going to complete an end-to-end workflow for structured IEs. I'll talk a bit about the details. Multiple format identifiers, some improvements according to feedback that we received from the customers. And we're going to be adding a reason for metadata changes. So today you can add a reason when you replace a file or remove a file, but you can't do that for metadata changes. And this is something which institutions requested that we record also that information. So the event of the metadata change can also include the reason for the metadata change. So it could be an error in the generating system of the metadata and so on. Data management, we're going to have improved set management, itemized set management, and I'll talk a bit about that. And validate source metadata on ingest. Integrations, that's going to be a big focus, continuing APIs, REST APIs. And infrastructure, there's a lot of work around Solar upgrade, basically moving on from 7 to 8, which is a major upgrade, which is also going to require re-indexing, which is going to be a bit of a pain, but unfortunately, we are going to actually deliver a mechanism as part of the release, which will make it parallel, so it will be simpler. But upgrading from any major to major with solar requires a reindex, and several other components. So it's a lot going on in version 8. So that's quite exciting. It's going to come out in June, end of June, 23. So what are we going to be doing in structural IEs? There's going to be bulk tasks for signing entire sets to parent IEs, and here really the challenge, at least from our side, is that it will be a single commit to the parent for an entire process, for an entire job, which assigns those child IEs to the parent. And around the list management of child IEs on the metadata editor of the parent. So we're going to support pagination when there's a large amount of child IEs. We're going to allow reordering of the IEs. Today you can drag and drop, but when there's a lot of child IEs, then drag and drop isn't feasible, isn't usable. So we're going to allow manually assigning an order sequence. So you can just take an IE and with number 1 and assign it to the number 1000. It will automatically then reorder the rest of the IEs. With a single commit. We're going to have a quick add via UI, since really there's no files in the structured IE, so it doesn't require the validation step. So we're going to add a quick add in the UI. And also we're going to enhance the reporting, where you can, today you have a report for the entire structure. So we'll be able to add a report where you filter according to the hierarchy under specific structural IE. In addition, so as I mentioned, we're going to add a reason to modifying descriptive metadata, not just of files. And around the multiple format identifiers, so this is really some feedback that we received. We're going to create events for all identification tools. We're going to add a new report of files ignored via, so this is actually not related to multiple file format identifiers. It's related to the splitting of validation and extraction. There's going to be a new report of files ignored due to format validation error. Improved set management. So it's around itemized sets. So adding a lot of capabilities which existed previously for logical sets and not necessarily itemized set. So users will be able to customize the results page, export the results to do a batch delete, pagination, and sort by added date. So all of these exist today, or at least some sort of parallel for logical sets, but not for itemized sets. And in addition, validate source metadata on ingest, which will be a new capability, also coming from the working groups. REST APIs, we're going to be working on producers APIs. Also, we're going to add an API for get Rosetta version. It's not going to be called exactly that, but just so you understand what it's going to be doing. Also coming from the working groups. And set privileges group on IE export. So you'll be able to define privileges on the actual export folder and files under that folder. So they can be accessible only by specific designated users. So currently, we are running several interesting projects. We are continuing implementation with Estonia. We are also running a project with a customer, building workflows around structural IEs for depositing articles associated with the entire hierarchy of journal, volume, and so on, issue. So that's going to be an interesting project, which I'm sure we'll communicate out to the wider community once it's complete. So I did set up a webinar. Let me stop sharing. I set up a webinar for another approximately 2 weeks from now. Please let me know if you didn't receive an invite, which is on a strategic level to talk about some of the exciting stuff coming up in Rosetta in the next couple of years, and preservation in general, the strategy for Ex Libris et Claravit. So please join, and also feel free to invite other colleagues and stakeholders at the institutions. And of course, reach out to attend the annual working group meeting at KB this year in June, which is it's going to be a great opportunity to sit together, talk about the strategy, and a unique possibility which we didn't have in the last several years. We couldn't meet face to face. So I really hope that you'll all be able to either attend or at least have colleagues who will be able to attend. So thank you very much. I will stop the recording and take a look at some of the questions.